Sorry guys, let's try to find your seat, please. I don't know what else to do. Marco. There you go. I can be dangerous if I really wanted to this thing. Alright, let's get going, you guys. If you don't have a seat, Nick, do you mind helping? I think you're good. Guys, there's room, and I think there's some seats throughout. We've got room for you guys. Go ahead and find a spot. Dominique, come on. Sorted. Hello? Alright. Good stuff. We're actually starting just a little bit early. I forgot to tell you guys a resource. So Courtney, 10k.com, that's COURTNEY, the number 10, the letter K.com. That's a digital business card for me. If you guys are looking for some resources, number one, if you want to get a heads up for when the next meetings are, they usually get announced around the first of the month. The top right link is our YouTube channel. So this is getting recorded. It's got both of us in the... This month it's not fancy. It has been fancy in the past, sometimes. But the idea here is if you want to go back and listen to some of the past meetups, you're more than welcome to do so. At that point, I think we have 70 plus videos on the YouTube channel. So there's various other things on there. There is a Facebook group. I believe it's linked on Courtney10k.com. It's called the Southeast Louisiana Real Estate Investors Group. We have a few thousand people in that group. It's a good resource, especially if you want to ask questions, share on or off market deals, various things like that. So utilize those resources. It also has some of my socials on there. Who here saw my AI headshots that I posted today? I am living a really weird life right now because I am today years old when I let AI tell me what I look like. And I'm not gonna lie, out of those 11 photos I shared with you, there was about 40 that did not look like me. And I'm not gonna lie, everyone's like, no hat, no hat, no hat. I'm like, I know. I had to go find 10 photos of me without a hat to give to it in the first place. I'm like pulling from like my, like teenage years, whatever. But the idea there is that was really weird. And I was telling some of you guys that jumped on Spotify. We were talking about this at dinner. Jumped on Spotify and I had an AI DJ give me some smooth jazz. like DJ moment. I'm like, life is getting really weird, really fast. With that being said, I'm excited to interview you today. I'm over-caffeinated. I had 2 sweet teas for dinner, so I'm excited to interview you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Tell people what time you fly in yesterday? Was yesterday, right?
We got to the place we're staying probably like 10 p.m.
All right. So you're staying for a whole week, right?
Yes.
I'll be your group. Spoiler alert. Dominique doesn't live here. You want to tell us where you live?
Yeah, I live in Colorado full-time and invest in New Orleans also full-time. So all my properties are here and I'm only here about once every 3 months.
Yeah. So we're going to jump in. With that being said, we're going to jump into this. So I was telling her at dinner, for the last 6 years of running this investor meetup, my preferences have been very obvious with the speakers I've brought. Because I got started flipping, but I don't do as much of it anymore. And it's obvious because I haven't had someone talk about flipping in a while. Sorry. So we're trying to rectify that. So let's start off, how did you get started investing in real estate?
Yeah, so I am 25 right now. I started in real estate pretty much the day I graduated high school. I was 17, and I knew that I wanted to do real estate in some capacity. I also knew that I wanted that to be something to do with investing, not like an agent or lender or something like that. So kind of house flipping, owning rentals, stuff like that was my dream since I was in high school, but not super achievable at 17. So I got my start initially just working at a real estate office. I was born and raised in California, so lived in like the Los Angeles area. Started working under a pretty successful agent in that market, which is pretty high-end, like multi-million-dollar market. So I got a lot of really good experience really fast with some high-end clients, high-end deals, but I was also really young and kind of hard to like fit into that market and mold. So I was mainly just there to learn. I learned from the best, kind of like learning contracts, sales, what is real estate, how does it work. And then a couple years later, I jumped into wholesaling. So once I kind of had the foundation built, I started doing investing full time. I was wholesaling for about a year and a half in Los Angeles market.
Can you explain what wholesaling is?
Yeah, totally. Wholesaling is essentially the process of getting a property under contract, not actually closing on it yourself, but assigning that contract to an end buyer who's going to close on it, and you essentially would keep a fee or the difference of the amount you tied up the property for compared to how much you sold it to your buyer for. So I did that for about a year and a half in LA. I wholesaled about 40 deals and just felt like I had got a ton of experience and knowledge and just transactions under my belt doing that. And then at that point I was pretty much ready to start my own company, which leads me to where I am now. Started it in New Orleans. That's where I started investing for myself in 2019, and I've been here ever since.
So what drew you to New Orleans in the first place? From California, you're currently living in Colorado.
So my dad lives here, and his family, they're all in Harvey. So I also invest mainly on the West Bank, so that's like total main draw there. He was there. He's not in real estate or doesn't do anything with real estate, but literally just having somebody in an out-of-state market that I felt like I could ask questions about the streets and the neighborhoods and what's your experience living on the West Bank and where would you recommend, and all these kind of just local knowledge questions.
All right. California, working with you got your real estate license, you're working on a real estate agent, really successful. Then boom, you go to that. It was a wholesaling firm that you were an acquisitions person for, right?
Kind of. I did everything as far as the whole process goes. It was a cool place to work. It was kind of like working on a real estate agent's team, like agents that have an office or a team, and everybody kind of works in the office, but at the end of the day, each agent is only doing their own deals and transactions.
Got it.
It was very much like that. It was just for wholesaling. So I only got paid on the transactions that I bought and sold and did the whole thing with. So I did all the steps in the process.
Okay. So, I mean, doing 40 deals in a year and a half is nothing to shake a stick at, especially in California, which is a higher price point, Los Angeles area. So your dad's out here, you decide out here, you're in wholesaling. What was the thought process around starting flipping?
Personally, it was always just like a goal or a preference of mine. Wholesaling was cool. It was definitely like a great way for me to start and learn, but it was never my goal. It was never really what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be the one owning the property and kind of making the decisions, and I knew that would eventually lead me into owning rentals and getting more passive down the line as well, which again was kind of the goal from the start. So it was just like the progression of walking through agent or getting started, and then wholesaling, and now flipping and renting and all the whole thing. So
okay. And so let's talk about when you first got here, 2019. What was your goal when you started out here for that first year?
My goal was literally just to do a deal, maybe two if it happened. I was still at the time working full time when I started investing out here, I was working at W-2 as well. Actually at a property management company. So I didn't feel like I had a ton of pressure to like do 30 deals a year from day one, and that was kind of my goal. I just wanted to take it slow, use the knowledge and experience that I had gained from wholesaling, and just see where it went. So that's how it went for the first couple of years. I did only a couple of deals per year, probably like 2 or 3 deals a year for 2019 and 2020, and then once I had really gotten my team built, the process down, learned the area, everything started becoming much more streamlined. And that was when my goals shifted to actually really start scaling and doing this on a bigger level.
Do you recall what you did in 2021 and 2022?
Yeah, that was when I started buying anywhere from like 1 to 2 deals a month in both of those years. And this year I'm buying like 2 to 3 deals a month. So just kind of trying to like keep upping it every year.
All right. And so let's talk through what does your business look like right now? So we're going to kind of go through that. And one of the things is, I didn't say this, but let's hold questions till the end, because I want to pull as much as I can out of her, and then I'm going to allow for questions. But what does your team look like today? First of all, how many projects y'all have going on right now?
We usually have anywhere from 10 to 12 flips going at a time.
So like in all the phases, so acquisitions, project management, and dispo. What does your team look like? Because you live all the way in Colorado. You're here every 3 months or so. I think the last time you were in town, is that when we met together as well?
Yes, I believe so.
It was
a while ago.
Yeah, I don't even remember when that was.
A minute ago.
Yeah. So, but what does your team look like right now to be able to allow you to do this from a distance?
Yeah, so there's definitely like some kind of subcontractor type people that come in from time to time and have their own roles that aren't daily, but I definitely have 3 people on my team that I communicate with daily. They're very much like part of the operation and super core team members. So that would be, first is my contractor. So I have pretty much one main contractor who handles all of our job sites. He manages the actual crews that are doing the jobs, and my main communication is just with him as a management point. So he manages timeline, crews, materials, where we're at with projects, and what we need to do to keep on schedule, and just kind of keeping me in the loop as far as like stuff that I can't see from a distance. If something is wrong or is going wrong, to tell me like, hey, I think we need to address this. Let me FaceTime call you or whatever and like show you what's going on the job site. I have another guy who works for me as kind of like a project manager role. He pretty much does anything that falls into the category of like a day-to-day task. So anything, literally anything that I cannot be here to do but needs to get done. It could be anything from like meeting sellers or videoing properties that we're looking at making an offer on. We buy properties at the auction, so he'll like go and represent me in person at the auction to bid. He'll do material deliveries, like anything that's a task type, thing on the day-to-day. And then I have my real estate agent who pretty much handles everything as far as once the property is finished, it finishes with construction, just making sure we get it. Photos taken, staged, looking good, and then all the way through closing escrow and kind of like babysitting the transaction, making sure things are in line. So those are like my core 3.
Is there any thought behind having a general contractor that basically oversees everything versus having, do you play that role in having subs? What are your thoughts behind having that? Because I do know that's a very common flipper question is, do I play the GC and coordinate the timeline, the budget, the materials, all the subs, the permits, whatever, to the extent that you can? Without a GC, what does that look like, and what is your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, it's a really good question because honestly, I think it's a similar answer to like, am I my own real estate agent, or should I get a real estate license if I'm flipping houses or owning rentals? And I think it depends on how much work you want to put in. Like, do you want to be the person that is handling all the paperwork or handling all the subs and the permits and all the things, or are you trying to create and build a business that is passive versus like building a job for yourself that you're going to now take on? So I think it just depends on like what you want to do, you know?
With that being said, what are some of your hobbies?
Yeah, I mean,
seriously, you like to hike?
Yeah.
You like to ski?
Yeah.
And you do it during weekdays? Sometimes?
Yeah, for sure.
That's actually really important because at this scale, that's really hard to do if you're like very hands-on, very involved without building the business. Does that make sense? I think so many people, there's a really good book on this called Who Not How. Have you read it?
Yeah.
I haven't. I've heard a lot of
Okay. Who Not How by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. The book was so good. As soon as I finished it, I started over again because I felt so like called out. But it's a really good concept where it's like you don't have to know how to do everything. It's who's a good who to help you do it, right? You can go get your real estate license, or could there be a good who that fits that role in your business, right? Same thing for a contractor, project manager as well. Okay, and then, so let's talk about the different phases of doing deals, okay? So the first one is you've got to find them. You have a very specific buy box. Do you want to talk about that and why you go after that and what came about you deciding that?
Yeah, definitely when I started buying out here, I mean, again, I'm not from here, so I didn't necessarily know like where to narrow in, and so my scope was very wide, and I was pretty much looking at deals anywhere within the general vicinity of New Orleans. And I bought a bunch of deals in like different neighborhoods, different areas, and have kind of just narrowed in after doing them and having different experiences with different types of properties or different neighborhoods. But right now my focus has been, I've narrowed in on literally what has been easiest. So the cities that have given me the least nightmare with like permits.
Well, that's a really important line to say. What was that?
Yeah. So basically not New Orleans.
We're reading between the lines here. Keep going.
But yeah, just areas, and then like with the market shifting, especially last year, the kind of tail end of last year, having definitely like a decent fall off in buyer pool and competitiveness for not getting 9 offers anymore on your flipped properties. Just figuring out like what is selling, what price point is safe, where am I not going to potentially lose money or not be able to return money to my lenders. And so I've narrowed it down to pretty much, I buy on the West Bank, some areas across the river, but mainly still just Jefferson Parish, and the 200K and under price point on the resale. So I'm not really buying major deals. They're all kind of like that entry-level buyer stuff. When we're done, there's still been really good demand for that on the resale, so I really haven't slowed down at all, even with kind of but the downturn of the market last year. Haven't been reducing my prices. I haven't really changed anything price point wise, and they've still been selling really quickly too. So that's just kind of been like the safe buy box for me lately.
So Jefferson, 200 or below exit price for the sale price. Anything that you stay away from?
As far as like repairs go, you're talking?
Anything, like the type of house, the bedroom bath count, cities, flood zones.
Yeah, not too much. I honestly am open to pretty much anything. I just don't do like anything new construction or to the point where the house has like one wall standing. It's basically new construction. So major renos though, I mean, we've spent 100 plus on a reno and paid 50 for the house. So definitely, I'm not necessarily looking for a deal where I have to spend just a little bit compared to how much I paid for the house. I'm definitely do probably at least 50% or more of my deals. I spend way more on the reno than I even paid for the house.
Okay. So So that's acquisitions. Let's talk about how you're finding these deals. So you have a clear buy box. You spoke about already that you're buying from the auction. And so it sounds like you're just buying Jefferson Parish at this point, for the most part. Some St. Charles, right?
No, some Orleans Parish, but more selective.
Got it. So let's talk through what are the ways you acquire properties. And let's talk about, like, because you have the background in wholesaling. So what are all the ways you currently buy deals?
Yeah, over the past, I think 2 or 3 years, I just recently broke this down, and all of my deals have only come from 4 categories. It's been foreclosure auctions, wholesalers, agents, and MLS. So it kind of has boiled down to those things, I meant to say agents and wholesalers like together, and then direct to seller, basically just from cold calling.
Oregon. So foreclosure auction.
Foreclosure auction, MLS, wholesalers or agents, someone who sends me a deal, and then direct to seller through cold calling. So it's all boiled down to those 4 categories, and the wholesaler, agent, and the foreclosure auction take up for sure the biggest chunk of the pie there. I don't buy a ton from the MLS, even though I have bought some deals there, and not a ton from my own marketing either. I really don't do much or spend much on marketing. Only a handful of deals have come from that. So over the years, it literally has kind of just been built up on getting to know people, like literally going to events like this, meeting people, or joining like all those Facebook groups that you were talking about, seeing who has deals, who's posting, building those relationships, and being that like solid buyer that people can turn to, that know they're going to close and not mess around, and they'll bring you another one.
So when you say agent and you're not buying off MLS, what does that look like?
So it would essentially the same as wholesaler, like someone who I've done a deal with before, who has sent me something before, or maybe I have bought something on the MLS from them, and then it turns into a relationship, which leads to more deals being sent to me directly.
So it's like a pocket listing. They haven't listed it, but they know someone who needs to sell. They just want a quick sell.
Exactly, yep.
All right, so that's your buy box. That's how you buy. That's how you find the deals. Let's talk about how you fund the deals. Historically, what are the main ways that you are, that you're buying these deals? How are you funding them? Because that's what stops a lot of people too. Part of it is, where do you find the deal? The second part is, how do you fund it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I personally have done this based on, again, relationships. So very similar to the deal finding and getting a lot of stuff sent to me now, is building relationships with private lenders. So everything I fund and have ever funded, I've never used hard money, has been with a private investor or my own capital. So when I very first started, I didn't have any deal experience or anything under my belt. Everything was funded with my own capital. Now I have almost no capital in every deal. I fund 100% of everything with private investors. And what that looks like is literally just building your personal brand. So Courtney, I know you do this a ton too. You have a ton of lenders, and it's things like how you host the radio show and people know you from that, or you've been on podcasts. It's the same thing for me. I've been on a couple really notable podcasts, and people have heard me there, or reached out, and asked to know more about my business, what I'm doing, and literally as soon as you start that conversation, you open that up, it can lead to who knows what. They may have deals, they may have connections, relationships, or money. And so, I've just built up relationships over the past couple years, and as soon as I get a deal under contract, I send it out to my lenders who I know are ready, looking to fund something, and just basically place the best lender with that deal, someone that's ready to go, has the right amount of capital, and can close in the right amount of time.
So later on this year, we're going to do, if you guys caught, last month we had the OPM series, the first of a few, which we did the hard money lender, the asset-based lender came and talked, right? We're going to do, I forget when it's going to be like June or July or something like that. We're going to do another OPM on private money, but I still want to dig into it here. So what did that first relationship look like? And how did that conversation, that relationship look like building it?
Yeah, so the very first ever private money lender I used, I did not get the best end of the stick, personally. I don't think so. And I think that that's okay. That's a sacrifice you have to be willing to make to start growing and scaling your business, so that you do have more good deals under your belt with strong return on investments that you can literally use to build your brand and get better investors. So the first one I ever worked with was an equity partnership, meaning that we split the equity in the deal or the profit. He brought almost all the money to the table. I brought maybe 10 to 20%, depending on the deal, of the total of the renovation plus the rehab. So we kind of lumped it all together. He brought almost all of it. I brought a little piece to the table, and then we split the profits. The other main reason that I did this to start is this one investor had a lot of capital. At one point, we had probably close to $1 million invested with that one investor. So he was on board to just fund everything. So this is how I kind of knew this would be a good place to start. We can get a bunch of deals kind of done and under my belt, and then I can go look for terms that are more favorable to me, which is what I raise now, which is debt equity, which essentially is just that I keep all the equity in the deal. They just get a straight up debt rate up front, which is set on day one. They already know what they're going to make, what return on their money they're going to make, whether the deal goes really good or not so good. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the avatar of that person. Are they, did they inherit that money? Are they just very wealthy? Is this guy walking around with a black trench coat and a black umbrella? Or is this guy a business owner? What does that avatar look like?
Yeah, so really good thing to point out is just where do you find these people? How do you start talking to these people? It literally is just talking to everybody about what you do. I met this guy when I was still working a W-2 job at the property management company I worked for. He owned several of the properties that company managed. And so he was in real estate, not really residential real estate, but he had a real estate background and had just kind of accumulated wealth over the years and was intrigued about what I was doing in Louisiana. So it's literally just telling everybody, whether it's people you meet face to face or I was saying before, building your personal brand online through being on podcasts, social media. I do a lot of posting and stuff on Instagram and places that people will reach out and find out about me. So at this point now, it's not so much me going around and being who's a good person to talk to about this. It's more people reaching out to me that have heard about what I do and kind of are looking for a good place to invest. But yeah, at the beginning, it was literally, I don't know who this guy is. I'm just going to talk to him about what I do.
I think too many people underestimate the power of talking about what you do. So you were talking about the power of it in buying properties, but also in raising money. It is, so someone said it best, he said a closed mouth doesn't get fed, right? And so if you go back through my social media, prior to 2020, maybe I had one or two photos of me with real estate, but I was, doing a few dozen deals a year. So it's but I just wasn't talking about it. And so I made this challenge of asking a handful of people in my sphere, neighbors, cousins, someone I went to high school with, a little bit extended. What do you think I do for a living? And almost all of them thought I was a realtor. Nothing against that, but it's okay, my message isn't clear. Because I'm not licensed, I'm not an agent, I just buy houses. And so there's a level here, if your message isn't clear, people aren't going to know to call you about a house that's worth under $200,000 or below on the West Bank. That's a very clear message. Would you agree? And if you follow her, what is it, Dom Flips Nola?
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on. That's very clear as far as what she does. It doesn't allow these doors to open. And trust me, it's not easy talking on social media. None of us, I think there's very few people who actually enjoy it, right? But it takes time. Would you say it's something that you build into your schedule? What does that look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's honestly one of the main things I'd say I do. Not
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I spend a good amount of time, obviously, like finding new deals and managing the projects we have going on and everything, communicating with my team, but to some degree, like, that stuff is somewhat passive because I'm just not here. Like, there's so many things I have to delegate, and I'm not spending time running around to job sites or doing anything hands-on with the properties. And so I spend a lot more time doing things that are more digital, so that's like building my brand, making videos, posting about what I'm doing and stuff like that, because that fuels the pipeline in every way, like you were saying. Deals, money, I've found like buyers have reached out to me to buy my flip properties from that. So just all kinds of stuff.
I think too many people underestimate that, and I think things are growing more and more towards how powerful. So private money is how you fund 100% of the deals you do?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and talk about the project management part. So the actual rehab. When you buy a property, let's talk about this. When you buy properties, you don't always rehab them. What does that look like?
Yeah, I don't always. Most of the times I do. But yeah, like, perfect example, I picked up a property at auction probably about 3 months ago for about 75% of what it's worth as is, and I literally did almost nothing to it. So there's a couple things, like little things that we're going to end up fixing or replacing just to bring up the value even a little bit further. But by no means is it a full rehab.
Like, what's your rehab cost on that? Like 10 grand or less?
Yeah, yep. So yeah, we're gonna just spend a little bit of money. But yeah, it wasn't like I raised a huge rehab budget or anything. And just sell it, it's good how it is. And so
that wholesale method. So I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a few different ways you can flip properties. So we already talked about one, the wholesaling. You're flipping really the contract, though. You're not flipping the property. And you've done some of that right here in New Orleans, right?
Yep.
And so sometimes you've done that. But then it's this wholesale method. It's where you have basically little to no rehab. You're just getting it at a great price. And then what do you do with it? Walk us through, why do you choose that, and what do you do with it? Just walk us through the stages of that.
Yeah, I think it is just important to note, like, there's always a way to make a deal work. If the price is right, it might be right for one thing and not the other. So I try to look at every deal with like open eyes to, it doesn't have to be a flip, doesn't have to be a wholesale, a rental, whatever, like it's gonna work for something and I'm not sure what, but I'm gonna figure it out. And I've run into a bunch of deals too where it's like, there's one price that I'd need it to be to keep it as a rental, and maybe that price isn't quite good enough for what the seller's looking for, but I'm not going to turn down the deal if I can make them a slightly better offer and wholesale it or flip it or something else. So just kind of keeping all options open. But as far as the wholesale process, it's quite simple. It's literally just buying the house, I guess assessing it, or figuring out the reason why you take that route versus the full flip. And usually it's just literally knowing your comps like the back of your hand. Like knowing that, if I spend 10 grand or less and this house is gonna be worth like 150, 160, something like that, and it'll sell really quick, so there's not that many houses in that price range. Or if I spend 30 to 40 grand, it's only gonna be worth 175. It's not worth the extra work. You're not really making any more of a return. So it's really just knowing the neighborhood, what the buyer's looking for, the comps, and figuring out like how much is it going to take me to make this property worth its absolute max for the size and area that it is, and can I spend significantly less and still make it very close to that value?
What I call it is clean and lendable. So clean, obviously, we're not, throwing a house that's got, the prior owner's stuff all up in it or whatever. But the other part is lendable, so that someone, an FHA or a VA buyer, even a conventional buyer can get a loan on it. So there's going to be things, so I don't know about you, but that 10 grand is very strategically I used to do a lot more flips where now I predominantly just do these hotels where I'm spending 15 grand or less. And it's going to be like roofs, maybe certain windows if they're busted. Like I'm looking for the things that I know the lender is going to flag that property for. Because I cannot tell you how many times I've done the paint, the flooring, even the countertops, or I've even had the appliances one time where at the closing table, they're like, oh, we're changing it tomorrow. I'm like, I just spent 6 grand painting, and you're going to turn it to what for me? Like, come on. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm sure you've had that too, right? So I call it HGTV syndrome, where I let them do some of the cosmetic stuff, but I make it clean and livable, and then I price it accordingly. That's the big part. I price it accordingly. It's kind of like when someone lists grandma's house. It's not the nicest house, but you get a discount because you're buying grandma's house.
Yeah, great way to put it.
So let's talk about your flips, okay? So you've already said is there anything off limits for you?
Not really. Again, I think it's just like if it's so far down to the studs or down to the bare bones that it's almost like new construction, I probably won't touch it. But as far as tearing the whole place apart, literally replacing everything, it's all fair game.
So let's walk through your process. So whether a wholesaler, an agent, something on MLS, the auction, property comes on your radar. Let's walk through how do you upfront assess it, and what do you do to understand the project before you tackle it, and then we're going to talk through as you tackle it what you do.
Yeah, so definitely depends on the opportunity, if it's seen or sight unseen, but if we do
Well, sight unseen before?
yeah, a
An
ton.
auction.
The auction, yeah. Probably like,
How do you account for that?
yeah, so probably 50% or more of what I buy is sight unseen. So I've just kind of gotten used to it.
You said more than 50% of what, sorry, who here has bought sight unseen? Okay, five people, 6 including myself, and 7. The 2 times I've done it, my cheeks have been so tight the whole way. I'm too conservative for this, and like, I'm too much a control freak. So, more than 50%, okay, you caught me off guard with that one. So, obviously that comes to the territory of the auction. How do you offset the risk?
Yeah, so the auction, I'd say, is a little bit easier because there's so many properties up for auction that you're almost like, okay, well, that one went past my bid, it's too high, like I'm gonna just drop out, I'll go for the next one, you know? It versus like, if you're putting in a ton of work, you've been talking to the seller for 6 months and like, you know, you built this rapport, this relationship, and then, oh man, like I gotta make this extra buffer because this is a sight unseen deal and the deal doesn't go through. Like you have so much more invested into it. So with the auction ones, like for me, honestly, it's like we literally come up with bids, go out and look at properties every single week. It's like I don't have anything invested into it really. It's just a repeat process every week. So those ones are easy for me to just be like, I'm gonna just, if this house clearly from the outside has a tarp on the roof, like for sure it looks like there's nobody living there, it's vacant. Maybe we can even look at the windows a little bit or something and see that there's like moldy drywall, like everything's gonna need to be replaced. I just build in an extra buffer on my max bid, and if I don't get it, then I don't get it. And that's just the end of it. But honestly, like there's a lot of things you can learn about a property without looking at it. I've learned that.
Tell me more about what that means.
Yeah, so
Does it speak to you in your dreams? Like what does that mean?
yeah, so and honestly, like the cool thing too for me even saying this is like I don't personally see anything I buy ever when I buy it because I'm not here, but so it's helped me rely even more on like systems and tools that you can use like literally from anywhere. You could be here, you could be anywhere, but if you can see the outside of the house, or even literally just like a recent street view from like Google Street View, if it's updated or recent, there's a ton you can find out about it. The first thing I use this a lot is if you go on Google Street View, you can adjust the timeline of what you're looking at. So you can see like, okay, this most recent screen you're looking at is from, January 2023. You can go back in time too. So you can go back to like February 2007. And there's a ton of times where you can see like, okay, back in 2007, this house wasn't raised. Like, boom, let me go through 2011. Oh, now the house is raised. So like, there's certain things that you can look at over time. Same with like looking through old listings if it's ever been listed before. Are there old photos online? Is there old information about the bedroom, bathroom, square footage count? Or on the MLS, get a realtor to pull that information, or tax records. So looking at like the history of the property can tell you a lot about potentially what you're dealing with today. So that's one thing I do a lot of. And then just like, there's also a ton of properties you'll find no information about. You don't even know the size of the house you're buying. I bought a bunch like that too. But again, it's like, pull up a map or like a satellite view of the area. You'll quickly see that probably like a couple other houses on that street, if you look at it from above, look exactly the same. They probably have the same floor plan, the same footprint. Pull up those addresses. Look at how big those houses are. What's the layout? Look at those pictures. When did they last sell? How much did they sell for? All those things. And just get a sense of the area, the different types of houses that are around and how similar yours might be to that one if you can't get inside or you can't get any more details. So anyway, a lot of stuff like that. And then once you start finding these keys, it's like, oh, okay, I look back and I saw that a couple years ago this house was raised. Boom, they must have pulled a permit for that. Let me go check the permit records. Like, let me go online to the permit department and see what permits have been pulled to the house. There you go. You see when it was raised. Oh, it looks like they also replaced all the plumbing or whatever. Like, you start getting these other information details. And there's websites and stuff like this you can use for like anything. You can pull up liens that might have been filed with the city, potential title issues, renovation, permit type stuff, like all kinds of things you can pull up. And it's not going to give you a full picture, but potentially a little bit more detail about what you might be dealing with.
The detective in me tips my hat to you, because do you do that or your VA do that?
I do most of that, especially if it's one we're actually going to like make an offer on or bid on. I want to be the one that like oversees that final process.
Excellent. You go into the house, what does that look like? Does your project manager go and build out? Do you build out a scope of work up front? Do you have the contractor go and build that out? Like, what does that look like?
Yep, so as soon as we can actually get into the house, or if we can get it on day one, before making an offer, yeah, exactly. We put together a scope of work, get my contractor to walk the job site. I'll usually have kind of an estimate in my head based on either the walkthrough if we can get in, or just what I've estimated from what it might cost if we can't get in. But once my contractor sees that we can actually put it into writing, get it formalized and signed, so that way, if it's a property, even if we don't see it before we make an offer or put under contract, I like to try to get that done during escrow, so that way, day one of ownership, we can actually start the renovation. If it's one that we buy at like an auction or something where, boom, you just buy it right then and there, then we'll usually send the contractor in, and we might be a week or 2 or 3 into ownership before we actually get started on the reno.
So I heard a few things. So you do build a scope of work. Can you explain real quick what that is?
Yeah, pretty much it's just it can be as formal or informal as you want it to be, and depending on the contractor you're working with and what sort of business they run, but it's going to essentially be some sort of writing or contract with your contractor stating exactly what they're going to work on, how much they're going to charge you for each thing, approximate timeline the job is going to take, and then it'll usually discuss what type of payments need to be made and when they need to be made.
So there's going to be draws, money up front, over time. Do you get very detailed in your scope of work? Like how much sheetrock, or how much plywood, or like which chandelier, light fixtures, paint color? Like, what does your scope of work look like?
So typically how I've done it, and I do it this way now because I have such a good relationship with this contractor, and he does all my jobs and he knows how to do them. But I essentially say anything that is not a design type product, so stuff you can't see like wiring, plumbing, roofing materials, stuff like that. I have him outline the labor, everything that needs to be done, plus the material for that type of stuff. Whereas things that are design type things, like light fixtures, cabinets, counters, floors, stuff like that, I just have him outline what needs to be done and the labor for what needs to be done, and then I actually pick out, design the houses and pick out the materials.
Okay, that's good. So you play a designer role, which is an important role in flips. I think a lot of people don't realize that role. And then, so you actually sign the scope of work. There's that agreement there, and then you try to start as early as day one of ownership, but sometimes there's a delay. And then talk to me throughout the flip. Is there anything that you must have that needs to go on that you think it's good for people to know?
Yeah, I think I like what you said about the design element. It is really important. I've honestly found it to be one of the most important things in the process, because there is a lot of people doing this. There's a lot of houses that are being renovated or new construction. There's competition. And so having an end product that's going to set itself apart in some way is super important. And so it's just little details of thinking through things that, like, if you as a potential person who might live there or buy that home would want to see in the property, making sure that you're passing that along and putting it in the property, and not just putting the cheapest of everything, cutting corners and not thinking about things that someone who's going to actually live there is going to think about. So always putting yourself in kind of the buyer's shoes perspective is a really good one, just to make sure that, every room has a closet and like things have proper storage and there's indoor laundry or things that, buyers are gonna be thinking about. And then honestly, just like staying up to date with like different design trends. And the 200K and under price point is kind of a funny thing because it's not like a designer home. It's very basic, it's entry level, like it's a functioning, like you said, like a lendable and clean and still nice looking house. So it doesn't have to be immaculate, but coming up with designs that you might see in a higher end house is
like
always
what's a tip? I know you did a few reels recently. Like, what are some tips that you have of things that you do to make the house feel, because it's an affordable price point, but what makes it feel a little bit more champagne on a beer budget taste type of thing?
Yeah. So looking at things that can easily be duplicated, that are like have a higher end look but can be done on a lower end budget. So to me, that's things like choosing maybe a slightly higher end tile with like a good pattern or design or a cool shape, like something that's sort of new and trendy, because tile is something that you're not buying very much of. If you spend extra on a nice tile versus a cheap one, you save like $100. So it's worth like splurging in areas like that that are going to really make a design feature pop. Or like the kitchen. We'll do, like, whenever we can salvage cabinets, we'll paint them like a fun, cool color, like a blue or green or something that's like trendy. Whereas if you go on like Home Depot and you're buying new cabinets, like the blue cabinets are the most expensive cabinets. So mimic something that's like a higher end look and just figure out ways to kind of do it in a lower end way.
So like one of the tips that we've done is whenever the good base of the cabinets are there, we actually replace the cabinet doors and the drawer covers. Because if the base is good, you can actually go to a kitchen store and get those. And that and the hardware is significantly less expensive than replacing the whole. But if it's good, got good bones, that's a really inexpensive way that we can turn it into the shaker cabinet style without having to fully replace it. And it kind of gets, the mall look out of there. And then sometimes we painted it too. What do you think are some things that new flippers or other flippers get wrong? Because, look, there's the moniker of the lipstick on a pig, right? What do you think are some misconceptions, some myths, some things that people get wrong when it comes to flipping?
I'd say the biggest one is definitely reno budget, and I would say I see that from wholesalers too a lot, and I've kind of gotten decent at this over the years of like actually showing them past projects that I've done or like scopes of work or bids, before and after pictures to really give people the true idea of like what a rehab costs that I've actually done, because I think it's definitely, it's always like shot on the low side when I literally would like recommend so highly shoot on the high side and try to come in low, and that's hard. That's hard to do, even if you think you're shooting on the high side. I rarely come in low. So there's always things that come up. There's always hidden things. There's always problems that you couldn't even possibly think of that are going to come up with your house. It could be security issues. It could be like termite stuff, or something breaks, or you weren't planning on replacing a water heater, but it breaks mid-reno, whatever it is, like that stuff will happen. So kind of keeping that buffer on the budget, I would say, is probably like the main thing that I've learned to do or messed up on my first one. And then kind of what I mentioned before is just like thinking about the house from a buyer's perspective. The first couple I bought, I definitely was like just kind of trying to turn and burn and get the thing done and get it through the renovation process. And like the first flip I ever did, for example, like one of the bedrooms was pretty small and it didn't have a closet. I should have added a closet. I should have figured out a way to add that, because that was the biggest, feedback on the resale, is that the house doesn't have enough storage space. And so I should have figured out a way to do that. And so it's just like thinking about things from that end buyer perspective, because I never lived there. I don't even really have a connection with the houses, but I have to put myself in those shoes or else they're not going to sell.
So speaking of that, let's start to land the plane here. Selling, the last phase. So we talk about acquisitions, we talk about funding it, we talk about the managing of the project. What does it look like? How do you know when it's ready? And what does it look like to passing off to your realtor, selling it, the whole nine?
Yeah, one thing I've kind of started doing lately too is, especially as the market started kind of going down a little bit last year, and just needed to make sure that the projects were like in top notch as possible in that price point shape. So we just started adding a few extra steps of like sending my project manager through, even a lot of times my realtor too, as like a second check, but just making sure that every little detail was dialed in. If there was any missed spots in the walls with the paint, or anything that got chipped or broken during, moving stuff in and out, like just making sure everything is dialed in and the property was like perfect when it was ready to go up for sale. But pretty much what it looks like is just making sure everything is dialed in and perfect, getting photos scheduled for the listing, and then my realtor actually does this awesome thing with virtual staging, which I've really, really enjoyed. I never would have even thought about doing that, but she always did it, and it's been awesome. It's just a really cool way, without actually staging your property and spending all that money and time, but to give the buyers really a feel of what their property is going to look like with their furniture, because usually the first impression or the first view that they get of the house is online. So they see the photos with the couch and everything in, and then when they come into the house, even though it's not there, they have kind of that picture in their mind. So that's helped a ton, just get like showings and people interested right off the bat. We usually put the property up, and had a pretty good track record even with like the downturn in the market last year. I don't think we really had anything sit for more than like 2 weeks. We've always gotten them under contract, and if something fell through, or a deal fell apart, or buyer asked for too much in inspection repairs and we canceled or whatever, just put it back up, and it's gone back under contract pretty quickly. So,
and I think there's something to be said that you're in a really affordable price point. I'm a big fan of staying in that median price point, that there's not a ton of homes in that price. There's a lot of people looking for it, and it's a good product at a good price. I mean, that's something that there's just not a ton of, and so we can move. Has there been anything, we've mentioned the changing market a lot, has there been anything that you pivoted with? I mean, we've had some crazy things. Insurance is crazy high. I mean, interest rates have been going all over. I mean, we've got banks collapsing. You know, we've got the whole nine. Every week there's something new to, like, you know, maybe get a gray hair about. So is there anything that you've done to adjust or pivot in this process?
I think the biggest thing was literally adjusting my buy box. It wasn't until, probably early last year, like when I kind of had like suspicions or there was talks about the potential market changing, that I really narrowed in on like, okay, I'm gonna really just focus on Jefferson Parish, even more specific, West Bank, 200K and under. Like, I was not buying just that stuff even like just a year ago. I had slightly higher end properties in other parishes or other areas, and so I think just exactly what you just said is like figuring out what are those neighborhoods, market, like price points or sectors of the market that there's very little inventory, there's not a lot available, and you're delivering a good product at a good price. Like, that is what is still selling. And for me, that's just kind of been the area that I've narrowed in on. And I do a ton in like even very specific neighborhoods of the West Bank. So almost everything I do is in like West Wego, Avondale, Marrero.
A lot of your comps are your own comps, like in the same neighborhoods. Like, I think you were saying one that you're of the comps, 5 of them were your past flips, right? And like, that looks familiar. That looks really great. Right?
Yeah.
Compliments to the chef. But it's like one of those things where that's really powerful. So as we land the plane here, I'm going to give you guys some time to ask questions. Are there any final thoughts? People probably ask you all the time, hey, I want to get into flipping. Is there anything I should know about it? What do you say to people if they're wanting to get into flipping, they're currently flipping? Anything that you want to recommend based on your experience?
Probably the biggest thing is just not to get discouraged, because it's definitely not something that happens overnight. Like, I think people could maybe look at where I'm at now, or even just like that I'm young or whatever, and think like, oh, this is so easy, like it just came because you just started doing it. And it definitely didn't. Like, this is me having done like cold calling, door knocking, like just a grind for years before I ever started doing anything like this or even owning my own properties. So just to not get discouraged about having to put in that work to get to where you want to be, and not giving up when the deal doesn't happen, in the first week that you start, or even month, or maybe even year. Like, but you got to keep putting in the effort, and it can be a really cool opportunity to, just financially and time-wise set yourself free in pretty much any way you want.
So I think she shared some pretty powerful things here. I think it's really important. One of my main takeaways was that Google Street View. Do you get to see stuff from Katrina for that? Have you ever gone back to August 2005, I mean?
I don't think a lot of them go back quite that far.
I mean, I didn't know if the Google car was driving around during that time, but I'm curious, right? Because that's the big question. What happened during Katrina? Okay, so that's one of my takes. She gave you a lot of great tips and tools here. So let's talk about what's next for you. I heard you mention some rentals, so as your friend, I'm excited for you. Are you starting to keep rentals? What does the rest of this year, next year look like for you?
Yeah, thank you. I am trying to start keeping rentals now. The last couple of years has kind of just like been building team, building the business, getting things running smoothly, and building capital more than anything to be able to now invest in rentals and be even more passive and just get longer term stuff. So yeah, kind of trying to keep like the best of the best deals right now, renovations, and just do the BRRRR strategy to pull the cash back out, or just buy stuff, with a solid down payment that's a good deal. I just recently started, holding more, and I'm trying to continue to do so. So I'd say that is on the horizons, as well as just kind of, I don't want to scale too much larger, to be honest, with the flip stuff. I'm hoping to flip probably at least like 25 houses this year, and maybe keep a handful more as rentals. So that's kind of like numbers-wise the goal, but I think if I can scale further, deal like capacity-wise, I would keep more of them.
Sure. I failed to mention this earlier during the announcements, but So we've got the Thursday meetup in Gretna, but then this Saturday, can you explain what's going on this Saturday? It's exciting. We're excited to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. Yeah, so me and my friend Neil, you guys probably know him from the West Bank meetup as well, but he and I are hosting a free event in downtown New Orleans on Saturday night. It's going to be an awesome time to just meet up with other investors. It's a pretty big event. We're renting one of the hotels downtown. We have probably about 300 people signed up right now. So it's going to be really fun. We're flying in a couple of speakers that have just great success within flipping and investing, development, and stuff like that. So we're going to hear from them. The whole thing's free, and we just really want to put on a space for more people, to bring together a chapter like this, the West Bank meetup, Baton Rouge meetups, and kind of just have everybody be able to come together in one place and just network with as many people as possible.
And what's the event called?
Invest Fest.
And how can people register?
The website, investfestneworleans.com. You can register there. It's in a lot of the Facebook groups and stuff too.
If you guys go to Courtney10k.com, if you follow me on Facebook, I shared it on there. I think I shared some of my stories and stuff like that too, where you can click the link, sign up. And then lastly, how can people get in touch what's the best way for people to get in touch, stay in touch with you?
Yeah, if you're in any of the local Facebook groups, I'm in there, so you can reach out to me. I'm on Instagram, DomFlipsNola. You can shoot me a message there. There's links to my website and stuff too, with email address if there's specific questions. But if I can help anybody or answer questions anyway, a ton of people have stepped in my journey and done that for me. So just let me know, and I hope I can do that too.
Excellent. Anyone have any questions?
How do you pay your team members, like your project manager, your acquisition manager, and your contractor?
Yeah, so the contractor is typically paid in installments. So that's kind of in that scope of work that we sign up front. He just outlines for me. Basically, it's usually a deposit up front, and then a payment once we're 75% of the way done with the project, and then the final lump sum at the end. My other project manager team member is paid on kind of an hourly rate. So it just depends. He just works for me part-time. It just depends per week how much work he does, and he'll get paid for that week based on how much work he did that week.
Does your contractor do other jobs outside of yours, or you keep him so busy he only works for you?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so she asked if my contractor does other work outside of me. He does a couple projects here and there. I know right now, he's working on another roof or something for someone, but I don't know that he does any other full-on renos because we do keep him pretty busy.
What makes the deal a good deal for you? What numbers you're looking at? What number you look at the profit from each?
Okay, so yeah, basically, how do I analyze the deal?
Actually, just for your flips, profit-wise, what makes it a good deal for you? Let's say we're making a profit between 30 to 50, or how it looks like.
Yeah, good question. So basically, how I analyze if it's a deal I'm going to buy is I take the total money that's going to be invested in the deal. So that's going to be purchase price, renovation, and then money costs or holding costs. And I usually want the deal to make at least 15% of that. So 15% return on investment or better. And so once I factor in essentially resale, subtract all the costs, if there's at least 15% profit left, it's usually a deal I'm going to make an offer on.
Great.
As you get into holding more rentals, what are the key criteria when you look at a house or a property or investment that makes you think flip it or keep it?
Yeah, basically criteria for keeping it as a rental or flipping it. For me right now, a big one has to do with insurance, like Courtney mentioned. So if it's in a flood zone, I automatically write it off if I'm going to sell it. If it's in flood zone X and I know I can keep my insurance rates slightly down, I pretty much just look at if it's a property where I can put enough money into it to get it to appraise high enough where I can pull out all or almost all of my capital invested using like the BRRRR method with a cash out refi. So essentially it has to be a property that I can put in not a ton of money, but spend it in a wise way so that the appraisal still comes in high enough that I can pull out all the capital I have invested into it. Hopefully that makes some sense. But yeah, definitely like look into more details on the BRRRR method and how to do that if that didn't make a ton of sense. But yeah.
Hi, so you don't necessarily do like a 70-cent deal, 65-cent deal like that?
Like the 70 cents on the dollar, the 70 cents of the ARV minus repairs.
No, I try to not just analyze a deal with like a standard formula like that because everyone is just so different.
Okay, thank you.
As far as streamlining your renovation, do you like try and use the same exact countertop every time, the same exact flooring every time, the same color every time, just so that you can say boom, 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 or are you kind of doing more custom based off of every 3 months or so reanalyzing that and going from there?
Yeah, the rehabs are fairly streamlined as far as the products. I usually have about 3 to 5 like products of each item. So like 3 to 5 colors of flooring or tile or something that I'm cycling through so that still gives you the chance to pair different products with each other and kind of have the design look a little bit different while you're still staying with a product that's like fairly the same look, fairly the same cost. You've used it before, you know where to get it, all that stuff. But there's certain things that I use the same thing every single time. Like I usually paint with the same color. I found one wall color that works and I stick with it. Or like one type of light fixture that really works and I stick with it. So it just depends. Like some items are mix and match and others are not.
I have a question. Do you have any proclivity of being a hoarder? Like whenever you come across that same item but at a discount, and so then you have like storage of it? Or like leftover from a project? I'm asking for a friend. But right, like back in my flipping days, I'm still trying to get rid of some of that SIT from like we left over from projects. I think I have 2 things of like insulation left over from a project that I need to like move on. Right?
Yeah, I don't do a ton of that because I'm not like here, so it's harder for me to see like, oh, that's on discount or sale. I saw it today at Home Depot. We usually just buy it for the project, but there is usually like leftover stuff, and if there's enough, we'll definitely use the same stuff in the next deal.
So do you store it or does it just travel? Does it go with your dad?
It travels. It travels from empty garage to empty garage, depending on.
And you have projects you can move along. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Lauren.
Yeah. Have you ever had any problems with appraisals?
Yeah, it's definitely come up. There's only been a couple over the years that have appraised so low that like we couldn't fix it or get them to come up, and the buyer also couldn't contribute anything as far as coming up on price. So we had to drop the price significantly. That's only happened like once or twice to me. It definitely can happen. But definitely I have to give like, I hope I can do this, but a huge shout out to my realtor because she's actually in the room in the back. But she is literally like super good for this kind of thing. So like this is another thing for building your team strong and finding the right team members. We just had a property last week that appraised 10K low. And the buyer couldn't come up and I wasn't willing to come down. And she figured out exactly what in the appraisal report was pulling us down by 10K, told me exactly what we needed to do to fix it and what we needed to send to the appraiser for them to reconsider. And they reconsidered and we got it up all 10K.
Wow.
So like finding people like that are able to look into those details and like not just accept, oh, we're 10K low, like, oh well, you know, and problem solving, figuring it out has been really important.
Well, great, but come get a book. You asked me a good question. You.
Me?
Yes. Come get a book.
Yes, I never
So,
went.
well, quick, before we dive into that, let me just say this. When it comes to it, first of all, she shared that on Instagram, so if you follow her on Instagram, you shared that recently. I love real estate agents. I've taught at many brokerages in the area. I write for real producers every month. I love working with agents. But one of the big conversations we've been having lately is that in a changing market, it does require skill to sell, right? And so I have given commissions as currency in relationships, being like, hey, I'm building relationships here, here, and here. Hey, you send me this pocket listing. Hey, I'm going to give you my next listing. Like, I have used it as currency, but understand that at the end of the day, skills do matter when it comes to selling a property. And that is something that with investors, I want to be very clear. One is I love working, and I've worked with, geez, at this point, many different agents over the last 10 years. But there's a lot of them who, I mean, the market has been really, the last 2 years, there's a lot of new agents that came in, a lot of things like that. And some of them, like I myself, the last 10 years have not invested in a down market, right? There's some agents who have not sold or helped people buy in down markets. And so we've been talking through what do those skill sets look like. So kudos to you for finding that and working through that, because at the end of the day, that's where it's so when you're picking the people on your team, it's the things like you want to find the people who in a changing market can help you pivot, adjust, and who are willing to show up with the skills or go figure those skills out. So that matters. The question? The color.
Pink color.
Is it gray?
It is a shade of gray, yes.
Is it a variable gray?
No, it isn't. It's called Silver Point, and it's from Sherwin-Williams.
Excellent. All right, any last dying question from Dominique? Go ahead. Wait, you had one?
Yeah,
Did you get a question already? No. Let's go ahead with you.
Oh, no, I was going to ask about the marketing. I know your brand is kind of making a name for itself now, but prior to that, what kind of marketing were you doing? Because I know you said that you didn't do, like on Facebook or something like that. You didn't market through that way. It was more about like the relationships that you built. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that? Just kind of building out the brand through like marketing.
Yeah, you're talking about for finding deals?
Yeah.
So yeah, the most like marketing that I put effort into is cold calling. Not personally, but like having people cold call for me. So I would say that's probably like the one thing I sort of put effort into, like at the beginning before there were just a lot of people sending me deals. But even then, I was still focused on building those relationships. So like in the first couple of years, I bought several deals on the MLS. So like working those agents that you did a transaction with and you had that rapport, like how can you get them to send you another deal or do another deal with you in some capacity or someone that they might know. So again, it's just kind of like putting out your message of what you're looking for and how they can help you and you can help them to achieve that. But yeah, like those relationships definitely don't happen overnight. You know, like you're saying, it takes time, and so you kind of have to do other things in the meantime to still find deals, whether it be searching on MLS and just making a lot of low offers until something sticks, or pouring into, you know, online marketing or cold call marketing or letters, you know, whatever like avenue you're going to kind of choose. But yeah, I always kind of did a lot on the relationship side, just like working wholesalers, trying to build those relationships. Cold calling was like really the only thing I've ever kind of poured time and effort into.
Some of you guys know my mentor, who I brought here in February, who interviewed, who's also a business partner of mine, Mr. Leon Johnson. I'll butcher it, but his quote is that, you know, we started out doing business, and if we're honest, trustworthy, and competent, eventually opportunities begin to seek us. And I think that's really what she's talking about. You build relationships, but this is a small industry. You can really quickly burn, you know, relationships. I have seen people burn relationships over a few bucks, or, you know, whatever that looks like. So be a person who, you know, get to know people. If you're an island, no one's going to know to come to you. But she's very vocal about her message, which is she's buying in a very clear box. I haven't always been good at that, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm like agnostic when it comes to real estate. I'm like, if it's a good deal, you're touching my greed gland and I'm interested. Like, because I bought stuff all over. I've done everything from low-end, high-end trailers to 6-bedroom houses to, whatever. But I've learned that there's a downside to that. If people don't know to come, and so over the years, people have known to come to me for the creative deals and for the curative title deals, like where the title's messy, or foreclosure. I've become, people have learned to come to me for that, to the point where my phone's ringing before the auction date because someone said, you need to call Courtney, right? So there is a level here that I want to encourage you to, one, stick around long enough for people to know to come to you. But then open your mouth enough and talk about either what you're trying to do or what you are doing so that people know to come to you. And this ultimately came down to, I was getting my hair cut, and if you can't tell, I don't stick with the same hairdresser every time. I'm like an opportunist. If there is one there and I have time on my calendar to get my hair cut. But so every time they're like, what do you do, all that. And I said, well, I buy houses for a living, and I generally do that by helping people. What do you mean? And I get telling her, and she eventually started crying as she's cutting my hair, and she was like, I wish I knew someone like you existed, because, a few years ago, and I ended up making a post about that day. And because there was this idea of, I had family members who, well, not family members, I had a woman who I used to go to church with a long time ago who was a single mom who messaged me, and she said, I got foreclosed on, and I didn't know this is what you did, and I had all this equity left in my house. I wish I knew someone like you existed, or we had it listed, it didn't sell, all this stuff, right? So number one, I'm going to encourage you to follow her online, get to know her, but watch what she does. Those videos she puts up or the posts she makes, that's not something that you can do in 1 minute. It doesn't happen for her. She has to plan it. She has to do it. And her message is getting clearer and clearer. We've known each other, 2 years now or something like that? I don't know, something like that. Your message is continuing to get clearer, and people now know what to come to you for, which is really important. But the lesson for that is, what is your message? Do people know what you do? Do they know what you're trying to do? And if you ask them what they do, would they get it wrong? I mean, they did for me. So with that being said, Dominique, thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause. Next Tuesday, May 9th, back in this room. I won't be here, but I hope you are. And Steve here is going to give the announcement. This Thursday in Gretna, 6:30 p.m., 6th Street. And then Invest Fest this Saturday down in New Orleans. And then 8:45 tonight, which is actually in 2 minutes. Don't speed. Challenge, come join us. Even if you join us for 20 minutes, we'd love to have you guys. Thanks you guys for coming. Have a good one. Reach out if I can help you anyway.